Kathleen here. I'm going to show you what to do with this big roll of fabric that you've been handed. What we need is to cut out pieces of 2.2 meters of fabric. Cut as many as you want to sew gowns, and I'll show you how to get a gown out of exactly 2.2 meters. So for the cutting, I just marked off on the floor with my meter stick and my measuring tape, and put a couple of pieces of tape to show me where to cut. Kitchen tiles are handy because it gives you a nice straight line and you need to keep it straight. So I just bring my fabric down to where I've marked the floor. If you're working with somebody, they can roll the other end for you, but working by yourself, a couple of hand weights to hold the other end steady is convenient. Straighten it all out, tighten it up. Okay, and so I'm aiming for that green tape, and it's simple. I'm just going to run the cut along the grout mark in the tile. Whee! And that's all you have to do. Do that as many times as you want fabric or gowns, and then pass the roll on to the next user. What you need to do with this after you've cut them, the pieces, is put them in the washer and dryer on high and hot to bleed out any color that might bleed, and to pre-shrink the fabric before we place the pattern pieces on it. That's how I lay it out on a 2.2 meter strip that you've seen the still picture of. We have a front piece, two back pieces, which are to be cut on the fold, two belt pieces, similarly cut on the fold. Those two will have to be sewn together to make one 90-inch belt. And finally, two sleeve pieces. So you'll note that the fabric is not folded selvage to selvage. I've left 1.5 inches along here, and I'm going to cut that off before I start, because that will be the neck facing and the ties for the top around the neck. The other important thing when you're cutting is that there are dots at 1 inch and 4 inch on one side of the sleeve. This fabric does not have any distinction between the right side and the wrong side, so it's important to mark those two before you take the pattern piece off, because it's very easy to make the mistake of putting the holes on for the thumb on the wrong stretch of sleeve. Okay, so when I was making the pattern pieces, I did the belts and ties a little differently, and that was to speed things up, and I'll show you a bit more on that later in the video. The instructions have the measurements for the pieces in up to 1/8 of an inch, and really I didn't sweat that. No one would notice 1/2 inch here or there on these one-size-fits-all gowns. Precision is not as important as speed. We need to focus on getting the gowns made and into the hands of the care workers as quickly as possible. So here we are now. We've moved up to the sewing room. As I mentioned, a couple of things are done differently than the instructions. The one being the belt, where I had you cut two 2-inch strips across the fabric instead of piecing a whole bunch of pieces together. We just have to piece these two together with your serger or sewing machine, whatever works for you. With a quick stitch. They're 44 inches long each, so we'll make an 88-inch belt. Once they're connected, simply fold in half and serge the whole length to make a finished belt 2 layers thick that looks something like this. We would ask that all seams be finished and all ends, because these gowns are going to be washed multiple times and they do need to stand up in the wash. Okay, and this is the front piece that we cut out on the fold. Now we need to change the direction of the fold to make the gown front, and you want the selvage on the bottom so that you don't have to hem the gown, folding it in this direction so that it's now long enough to be a gown. The next step is to cut out the neck hole, which you'll see I've already done using my little pattern piece. It's 3 inches by 4.5. Nice round neckline. And opening that up, we now are going to use the great long piece of 1.25 inch at the selvage that we cut. You need 55 inches of it. Start in halfway, put it against the front of the gown. So I'm sure you've all done neck facings before. You basically just, and at this point we've already got the back attached. You just pin it on, flip it to the inside, and sew a straight stitch there. That will leave the ends sticking out, and they also just need to be finished in the usual fashion. Fold over 1/4 inch, fold the selvage over that, and a straight stitch along there. The rest of the instructions in this document are pretty much as is, and I think fairly clear. Having said that, I've made every mistake possible to make, having done enough gowns now. So if you have any questions or problems, comment on the video and I will get back to you. And I think that is it. It takes about an hour to make a gown. Happy sewing, and thank you for your help.